I really enjoyed the conversation we had in my office. I like your emphasis upon abundance. I had a chance to scan your Bettering Human Lives from Liberty Energy, and I think you just nail it. You're speaking about abundance, both in terms of our natural resources, but the abundance it means in terms of an increasing per capita GDP. And we do it in a way that we lower emissions as we increase GDP. And you look at a country like Germany, and they have almost entered energy poverty, in which we have lowered our emissions on a per capita basis more than they, and our economy has grown more than they. So I just want to, we're simpatico on this. And I think, frankly, we should all be. Now, I'm also very interested because one thing that I mentioned in our conversation, I've been very concerned about an offshoring of carbon emissions to countries like China. But as we offshore the job. And that prosperity we're trying to build for working Americans, we lose to a working Chinese. Now, they don't enforce their environmental regulations, so their SOx, NOx, and whatever blows over on us when we're trying to do it right, and they use it for competitive advantage. All that to lead into. And by the way, you allude to that. You talk about how Great Britain has actually offshored their carbon intensity, and then they reshore it through the products they buy. So it's an artificial depression in their carbon intensity. I mean, I think you bring a sophistication to this argument, this discussion, which is just we just need. Now, one thing I've been supporting is something called a foreign pollution fee, in which we look at the emissions profile of a U.S., you name it, concrete, and then you compare it to aluminum, let's say aluminum, and we compare it to a competitor like China, which does not enforce emissions. And we put a fee roughly equal to their avoided cost of not complying with internationally acceptable emission profile. Any thoughts on that? Because it seems very consistent with the problems you point out in the Bettering Human Lives from Liberty Energy.
Thank you for that question, Senator, and thank you for the great dialogue we had about all these issues, about energy, about bettering lives, about trade practices, about prosperity for Americans. I think yourself and I and President-elect Trump are very aligned on all of those. And I think you have a creative idea about how do we address some of these asymmetries that have developed. If you look at the data of economic growth in the United States versus manufacturing growth in the United States in economic output, they roughly track for a century. And right after the year 2000, when China is admitted to the World Trade Organization, they diverge dramatically.
With ours going down for the manufacturing and China's manufacturing going up, but also their emission profile exploding at the same time.
100%. And as you said, look, the United Kingdom and Germany and other of our European allies led with us, and they've gone even further on, I think, this destructive habit of just moving their energy-intensive manufacturing out of their country and then counting.
So I'm taking that as a yes, you'll support my foreign pollution fee. But anyway, let me ask you, because one critical role of DOE is to help calculate the embedded emissions. Now, some fear that, thinking it's going to be some regulatory crackdown. I see it as a way to competitively to outcompete others, because if theirs is here and ours is there, and we know that from this calculation, then that helps our domestic manufacturers because there'll be a higher fee placed upon the product coming from overseas. Do you follow how I'm saying that?
Yes, I'm following you, Senator.
Now, so DOE has a pilot project currently calculating embedded emissions. Would you commit to continuing to support that program?
Again, if I have the privilege to be confirmed, I will look into all of these efforts. It sounds like
I'm 18 years old and I want a future.
We will have order restored. There will be no additional outbursts. The officers will remove this individual from the room, and we will continue with the hearing of the. We ask that the testimony be delayed until the room is cleared. Please proceed, Mr. Wright.
May I suggest that the people who are protesting look at your monograph on building human lives, because it shows that U.S. emissions have come down in absolute amounts, per capita amounts, every way you want to measure it, since 2000, since 1990. We are doing the job, led in part by, the things that you and I have talked about in our meeting. So going back to, you also will be negotiating international energy partnerships through the Office of International Affairs. And you spoke about global leadership as well. It wasn't in your written remarks, but it was in your spoken testimony. You want to elaborate on that, please?
Yes. As we discussed, energy is the enabler of everything we do. But America, going from 20 years ago, the largest importer of oil in the world and the largest importer of natural gas in the world, to today, the largest exporter of natural gas in the world, enormous growth in our geopolitical leverage. We were able to fill most of the gap when Russia invaded Ukraine and Russian gas imports into Europe were reduced. Most of the replacement gas came from the United States. We couldn't have done that 20 years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll just say we began the conference, the 5 minutes, to talk about abundance for the American people. Now we talk about our abundance helping our allies. We're all about abundance. Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank